Let's take a few minutes now to chat to George Charlton, who is a former user and now a drugs harm activist. Morning, George.
Morning, Amy. How are you?
Yes, I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Well, listening to that, man, goosebumps listening to Longman there. You know, I know that lad. And here we go again, back on the phone to BBC Tees talking about the drug death figures going up, 4,393 deaths. Again, Amy, highest numbers since 1993. We hold this record in the North East, you know, of 8 consecutive years where we've been the highest rate of drug-related deaths, right? And continually what we do is we adopt an approach. I'm saying we, not me or you, but Boris Johnson, Priti Patel, adopt an approach where we repeat the same behaviour and expect different results. And it's insanity what's happening currently.
It's not a record to be proud of by any way, shape or form, is it? And when you hear that, when you hear that damage that people are doing to the bodies, you have to wonder why there isn't more support for people.
But you know what it is? I think that there is. You know, I work down in Middlesbrough, right? And one of the things I can see is when I'm out there doing the work that I do, kind of getting the locks going out into the community to keep people alive, there's real support from the Middlesbrough community, right? But what tends to happen is I think lots of ministers think that they're going to lose votes if they actually argue positively for evidence-based approaches. So what we know is, right, there's a really strong evidence base about what would stop these deaths really, really quickly. But the government ignores its own guidance. So the Advisory Council for the Misuse of Drugs in 2016 gave comprehensive guidance to the government about things that would work, which were largely dismissed. The Scottish Select Affairs Committee last year gave a comprehensive bunch of recommendations to the government about what would work, and the government ignored it. And you know what's really bizarre, Amy, for me, right, is we're in the middle of a global pandemic where what we hear day in, day out from Boris and from others is that we need to follow the science, we need to follow the guidance, right? And they'll follow the science and the guidance for everything to do with COVID, but not to do when it comes with drug harms. And I think that, to me, makes a statement that people who use drugs and these drug-related deaths in our region, those people don't matter. Why aren't we following the evidence?
So when it comes to drugs at the minute on our streets, I mean... Yeah. When you're talking to people, what are they using at the minute? I mean, what could be lethal?
Well, all drugs could be lethal. And all drugs could be lethal. I mean, we know in Middlesbrough that heroin is being used in a problematic way. We know that cocaine's on the increase, not just written in that report. You know, 7% greater uptake on people using cocaine and cocaine-related deaths. But also in Middlesbrough, we have a problem with drugs like T20s, which are drugs which are being sold as temazepam, but they're not made by pharmaceutical companies. They're made by organised crime gangs to look like the real product. And again, here lies the problem, right? So again, what we're doing currently is we're giving away control of a drugs market to organised crime gangs, right, who bring illegal drugs into our communities, which are filled with adulterants, which are killing people. Last week in Newcastle, 4 parents got a phone call to say that their loved ones had died of taking drugs like MDMA and ketamine. Students, not bad people, Amy. These people who take drugs, right, 3.2 million people last year took drugs in our country, 11%, right, of the UK population took drugs. We're not bad people. We're just changing the way we feel, but sadly, these drugs we're getting are coming from organised crime gangs with no regulation, with no guidance about how to take it. But you know what, right? This is the crazy part of it for me is we know what the answers are. There's global evidence which has been around for the last 20, 30 years about what works. We know drug consumption rooms and safe injection facilities work, 20 of them globally. There hasn't been one drug-related death globally, but the government says no. Heroin-assisted treatment, we've got a lot to be proud of. You know, in Middlesbrough, we've got a great project which was commissioned by Cleveland Police and Crime Commissioner Barry Coppinger going on at foundations. And I see these guys every day. I was with a young woman the other day who was on the HAT programme who was crying, right? And she was crying tears of joy. And I said, why are you crying? She said, because it's the first time in my life I've ever been able to buy a Sledi. Think about that. Do you know what I mean? But these people come, they're using diamorphine in a safe environment where if things go wrong, they can have their life saved. But you know what? There's a lot to do with stigma, Amy. My mum used diamorphine for post-stroke pain and for a broken hip. But because she was a nice little grey old lady, she didn't get stigmatised and demonised. However, with people who use drugs to address emotional pain, like Longman says, oh, buzzing. He's not buzzing. He's not enjoying his drug use. There's no enjoyment in that. He's using drugs to address adverse childhood experiences and traumas. And I think that we need to start looking from a public health perspective rather than a criminal justice perspective.
Can I just ask before we move on to the news headlines, what more then needs to be done? Because I know you said there's a lot of help out there and there's a lot of information out there, but then you did say, these young people, these students, young people with their whole life ahead of them, and clearly they're not getting that message. So what more needs to be done?
Well, I think if we focus particularly on students just for a second, universities need to accept that a just say no approach doesn't work. Their policies need to be one that says, if you're using drugs and you've got a problem, come and see us. You're not going to get put out of college. You're not going to get suspended. We need to really create this culture in our society where we can help people to openly talk about drugs without fear of stigma, shame or punishment. And I think, other stuff, drug testing, it's an absolute no-brainer. We are the Loop do an awesome drug testing project. We came to Durham in 2018. We were testing drugs for students, giving harm reduction advice and guidance. What their research showed actually was that didn't encourage more drug use. What it did show was that when young people who bought drugs who they thought maybe was MDMA, and it turned out to be not MDMA, the young people discarded of those drugs and other drugs that they had. So this idea that drug consumption rooms, safe injecting facilities, heroin-assisted treatment, testing, like access to naloxone is an enabler. It's an absolute nonsense. Harm reduction's about meeting people where they are, giving them advice and information and providing opportunities for help and support. But you know what, very quickly, because I know we're ending, huge shout out to BBC Tees, man, because what you guys always do is allow voices like mine to come on and give a very balanced approach, right? I was those people. I was Longman. I was in the jail. I was on locked psychiatric units. I was the scum of the earth. But now I've got a lovely home. I'm looking out my window now in Durham. My wife's in bed. I'm about to take my child to school. We do recover, but we need love and compassion and support in the community. So thanks, BBC Tees. You've been mint.
No, and thank you as well for coming on and talking to us so honestly and openly as well. Honestly, take care of yourself, George. Thank you so much.
You as well. Nice talking to you. Cheers. Bye.
Bye for now. George Charlton there, former user, as he mentioned there, now a drugs harm activist. He's so passionate about what he does and he's so passionate about helping other people. We'll talk a little bit later.